So how did it go? Could you solve the tasks? Let's have a look at my solution now. For that, we first have to go to our landing page and add margin top to our image. So if we go to our website and to the starting page, of course, we can see that this should be moved down. As I said in the instruction video, you could actually inspect the navbar right here, and you would see that the height of the navbar is 42.86 pixels. So let's say we add a margin top of 43 pixels for now. To do that, we go back to our code into the main CSS file. That's the CSS file where the styling of our image is located. And for that, we need the ID selector, the product overview ID selector. Right here, we now add margin minus top with 43 pixels, as we just saw it. This should solve this problem. And as you can see, it does, and our image and our slogan look a lot better already. This was task number 1. In task number 2, let's have a quick look, we should change the position of the slogan to the left lower corner of the image. We should use pixels, and we should have some space to the left and to the bottom of the image, but we should not add a margin to it. So let's see how we could solve this. And the first thing we probably need is the class or the ID of our slogan. This is the H1 selector right here, and it's part of the product overview class. So a good selector probably would be this one, the product overview H1 selector. Now, what should we do right here? Well, as you remember what we learned, there is no position property applied. So if I would add top 200 pixels, for example, like that, and reload the page, nothing would change. But if we now add a position property, which one? Well, actually a value of your choice, but I will go with absolute right now, because with absolute, we are able to take the elements of our slogan out of the document workflow, and this allows us to kind of position it the way we want on our website. So if we now reload the page, we can see that the element moved down now because we have the absolute position, we took it out of the document flow, and now we are able to position it wherever we want. Now the question now is, why don't we actually use top and not bottom right here? Because our task is to stick the slogan to the left lower part of the image. So why should we define the distance from the top to the slogan and not from the bottom to the slogan? Would be a bit more logical. Now let's see if we can easily change that by changing top to bottom and maybe add a distance of only, I don't know, 40 pixels, something like that. If we now reload the page, well, our slogan is gone. No, it's right here. But why is it right there? Let's see. Let's maybe add a distance of 0. This should make it clear for us what happens right here. Like that. Okay, it's down there. Let's inspect that now. It apparently is stuck to the viewport. Is this the case? No, it's not. As you can see, the element sticks where it is, and this is simply due to the fact that this is the default behavior if the positioning context for our absolutely positioned element is the HTML element in this case. So the positioning at the moment simply depends on the HTML element. We talked about that when we learned how to use absolutely positioned elements. We will dive into that in the next task of the assignment, but for the moment, let's just make sure that the slogan is positioned correctly, and bottom is not the most intuitive way, unfortunately, right now. So let's maybe use top with maybe 450 pixels, like that. Let's see what happens. Yeah, I think this is fine. And now we need to add a bit of a gap. So let's maybe say left, maybe 60 pixels. Let's see if this is too much or if this is fine. Yeah, I think this is okay for the moment. So with that, we were able to position the slogan, but we saw this strange behavior we had with our slogan when we added this bottom property. So I think this leads us to the next task, to task 3. Because we should think about what the actual positioning context of the slogan was. We learned that it's HTML, but let's quickly dive into that. And what the new positioning context should be and how we could achieve that. Well, as I said, the positioning context at the moment was the HTML element. Why was this the case? Well, if you remember back what we learned about the absolute positioning, then we had two options regarding the positioning context. Either the closest ancestor, which has a position property applied, and if we look at the index.html file, we can see that the h1 element right here, get the freedom you deserve, has the product overview class as an ancestor. And as we see right here, there is no positioning property applied, so this is not the positioning context of our element. And then we only have main and body, so no elements which have any position property applied. Therefore, the second option of the positioning context for such absolutely positioned elements is the case, and this is simply the HTML element. This is what happened right here. That's why you saw this strange behavior when we said bottom 0, which planted the slogan down there, because that's basically what happens if the HTML element is the positioning context. However, we want to change this positioning context now, and a good way to do this would be to make this product overview class right here the positioning context, so our section element. Well, we know how this works, right? We can simply add the position property right here, and the best value to choose for purposes like that is relative, because relative will keep the parent in the document flow and not change its position at all. And that's what we want, because we are happy with the position of this class. We are just not happy with the positioning context of the child. So if we reload that, we can already see that the slogan moved a bit, the image stayed where it is. And if we now add top 0 right here and left 0, we can see that if I reload, the element is now in the positioning context of the image. Again, we have these default borders of h1, we will keep these. And now also bottom 0 would work, because right now we have the correct positioning context. And if we do that, we can see the element is now stuck right here to the bottom of our image. Now what we could do though is we could give it some distance from the bottom, and again, maybe 50 pixels from the left. Let's see. Yeah, I think now this works fine. And with that, let's have a look. I think we also finished the third task. And by the way, as I wrote right here, this is also the same approach that we followed when we created this badge right here, because the badge also has the position absolute declaration applied, while the package right here has position relative to be the positioning context of our badge. But we'll come back to the packages page in a few seconds. Let's first go to our starting page again and fulfill the fourth task. So we should change the position of the slogan with the percentage values. For that, I will simply change 10 pixels to 5% and left right here to 3%, like that. If I reload the page now, we can see the positioning slightly changed, but it's still okay as I think. And we will work more with these values right here when we talk about dimensions, sizing and units. But for the moment, let's just stick to these and continue with the fifth task right here. So switch to the packages page. This is an easy one actually, because we did it right now. Now on this packages page, we have to do more. We have to add a z-index of 10 to our badge, so to the package badge class. Let's do this by going to the packages folder and opening the packages CSS file. Right here, we can see our package badge class. And now we add a z-index of 10, as the instruction told us. If we do that, and I didn't reload the page, I want to scroll before I reload. So let me see. Yeah, it works fine. Let's now reload the page with the new code. And as you can see, the recommended button or the recommended badge now, well, is kind of not behaving the way it is intended to, because we added this z-index, and this z-index is now higher than the z-index applied to our navigation bar right here. We can quickly check that if we go to the code, to our shared CSS file. And here in the main header, this is our navigation bar, we have a z-index of 1. And that's exactly what's causing that problem, as the z-index defines our positioning of the elements along the z-axis. Our badge right here has a higher z-index and therefore is positioned above our navbar. Not the behavior we want, but the behavior we have at the moment. How could we solve this now? Well, if we look at our last task, task number 7, we see that we should solve this issue by maybe working with the stacking context. Because the problem is that we are not allowed to increase the z-index of our navbar. Because if I would just add, right here in the shared CSS file, a z-index of 11 and reload the page, you can see that the issue would be fixed. Problem is, we are not allowed to do that, so let's change it back to 1 right here. But as we see in our hint already, changing the stacking context and by that adding the position property to another element might be the solution that we need right here. Well, let's open the index.html file right here in the packages folder and let's have a look. We have our badge right here. Then we have the anchor tag. Yeah. And we have this package class. Now, wouldn't it make more sense that the z-index actually only defines the position between our background image, the package right here, and the navbar? But the elements inside this package, so the badge for example, should be within this stacking context. You remember we talked about that. So what this basically means is, remember back the theory example, the z-index of the background image of this package and the navbar define the general positioning of these 3 elements and all the items inside of them. And the positioning of the items inside each of these packages is defined by this separate stacking context. Let me show you what I mean and how this works. Because if we now go to the packages file, well, then we see that package already has a position property. So as I wrote in the instructions, you might have to add the position property. This was kind of a trap. You don't have to do it because it's already there. But what you can change here is the z-index right here. If you now change this z-index, for example, to 1, which is fine, which would be the same z-index that we have for our header right here. But if we do that and reload the page, we see that now the entire package is above the navigation bar. Why is this happening? Well, if we think back about the structure that we have in our HTML file right here, we talked about that already, then the package class right here comes after the main header class right there. And if we have 2 elements with the same z-index, then the later element in the code will be the one that is positioned on top of the other. But if we go to the shared CSS file again and now simply increase the z-index to 2 for our main header, then we can see that this issue would be solved and the package is below the navbar and the badge is also below the navbar. Just to be sure we understood that. Why is this happening now? Because the badge still has the z-index of 10, we can see it, which is higher than the z-index of our navbar, which is 2 now. But as the stacking context of this badge is now this package element right here, we can choose whatever z-index we want for this badge because this will only affect the z-axis positioning of the elements inside this package, but not the positioning of the parent elements, so of the navbar, of the package, and of the background image. And now you could ask yourself, why was the stacking context apparently only created once we added a z-index right here to our package? Because you remember, whenever we add position fixed to an element, a new stacking context will be created automatically, no matter if we apply a z-index on your own. Well, for position relative and position absolute, this is different. Position relative and absolute will only create a new stacking context once you specify a z-index on your own. And with that, I just wanted to show you how this works and that the stacking context might become important also in your daily coding experiences. But to be honest, we don't need that z-index right here because the page worked quite well before. So we can actually delete the z-index right here from our package and also from our package badge right here because this is fine. Let's save that. And we can also change the z-index in the main header back to 1. If we do that and reload the page, we can see everything works as before, but now we have an even better understanding of the z-index and of the stacking context. With that, it's now time to summarize what we learned so far in the next video.